Looks like a bulb of some kind, doesn't it? Actually, it's an egg. Something inside is moving, getting ready to come out. And here it comes. From a tiny egg his mother attached to the side of a plant, a baby caterpillar comes into the world, head first. Hard to believe that long body was curled up inside that tiny egg, isn't it? You can see through the egg because it has no shell, just a tough outer coating. Out at last, and hungry. He's looking for his first meal. And he finds it, the coating of the egg from which he just hatched. Look closely, and you can actually see his mouth, chewing bits of egg. He may look like a worm, but he's not a worm. This caterpillar is a young butterfly, a swallowtail butterfly, going through his first stage. At this stage, he does little more than eat. See him there under the leaf? It doesn't take him long to finish his egg. He grows quickly and looks for more to eat. This is when he becomes a harmful insect. He chews the leaves of the plant. No such thing as eating slowly. He gobbles that leaf as fast as he can. See his legs? 3 pairs, 6 legs in all. Insects of every kind have 6 legs. Time out. He stops eating for the moment because he's bursting, truly bursting. The caterpillar has grown inside, but his skin hasn't. So there's only one thing to do. Let the old skin burst, then crawl out of it. And that's just what he does. The process in which growing insects shed their old skin again and again is called molting. Those dark bulges at the front of his head are his eyes. Farther back on his body are colorful black and red markings. Then it's back to eating leaves again. In no time at all, he seems gigantic compared with his first skin. And there's a danger that some bird will spot him and eat him. For this, he has a way to protect himself. If you were to touch this caterpillar, no matter how gently, he'd stick out little tubes called horns that give off a smell, a scent so bad, so disagreeable, birds don't come near. They let him alone to go back to eating. Those markings on his body are those of the young swallowtail butterfly, sometimes called a caterpillar, sometimes a larva, and there's a reason why he eats so much. After molting 4 or 5 times, he'll go into the next stage of his development, a stage that lasts many weeks, during which he'll eat nothing at all. Now the caterpillar knows it's time to begin the next stage. He searches for a place to rest. When he finds one, he clings to it. He's beginning his quiet stage. Watch how he makes 2 thin but strong threads to attach himself to the plant. final molt. Then he begins the stage known as the chrysalis. This is the chrysalis. Inside, he begins a long sleep, during which his body is changing. He's turning into a butterfly. In a process known as metamorphosis, he's forming wings, legs, and other body parts of an adult. When the adult is almost ready to come out, you can see his wings folded within the hard outer shell. At last, the shell splits open, just as the caterpillar's skin did in the beginning. And out comes the adult, head first. Antennae, long legs, wings, things he never had before. He's weak now, so he takes a moment to rest. A moment in which his wings will unfold and dry. The swallowtail butterfly has no tail as such. It has 4 wings. The so-called tails are parts of the hind wings that stick out like the tails of birds called swallows. That's how it gets its name, swallowtail. You can tell the butterfly is resting when it holds its wings straight up over its back. He's covered with colorful scales, quite different from the green skin of the caterpillar. And now he has a sweet, pleasant smell, like flowers, a scent that lady butterflies find highly romantic. The scent comes from some of his scales. His antennae, or feelers, really serve him as both a nose and ears. His eyes are now called compound eyes because they're made up of thousands of smaller eyes. And that black tube curled up at the front of his head is not his nose, but part of his mouth. He'll use it soon to suck juices from flowers. Imagine, this creature was once a green caterpillar. His wings are spread far apart now. They're nearly dry. He's ready to begin his first flight at any moment. And there he goes. From flower to flower. Look closely, and you'll see he's dipping that long black tube into the flower to suck the flower's juices. No more eating leaves. He'll live on liquids from now on. Uh-oh. A young lady butterfly has picked up his scent. It's love at first sniff. They become a couple. In time, she'll lay eggs on the sides of plants just as her mother and his mother did. And so the cycle will be complete. The life cycle of the swallowtail butterfly. You're looking at silk, a cocoon made of silk. And now you see something moving inside the cocoon, the insect that made it. She's coming out of the cocoon head first, after resting inside for nearly 3 weeks. During that time, she completely changed her form from a caterpillar to a moth. Those big dark spots are her eyes. And now she blows drops of moisture as she comes into the air for the first time as an adult, climbing out through a hole she'd bored in the cocoon. The silk farmer who's raising her allows only a few moths to become adults like this, because adults spoil the cocoon by boring a hole in it. This one, not much bigger than your thumb, will rest for a while before laying next year's batch of eggs. Early in summer, the female lays from 200 to 500 eggs on special paper provided by the farmer. When the babies hatch, they crawl out of their eggs as tiny caterpillars called silkworms. Most hatch at the same time, but in every group you find a few slowpokes. At this stage, they're so small, they make an ordinary pencil seem gigantic. Silkworms eat nothing but mulberry leaves. So the silk farmer waits until the first leaves appear on the mulberry trees. Then he sets the silkworms upon the leaves. At this stage, they're furry. But they eat without a stop, grow quickly, and soon appear smooth and white. The bigger they get, the more they eat. And eat. And eat. Every day they eat as much as they weigh. Until finally they've eaten so much they stop to rest. By now, the worms have eaten so many leaves they're bursting. Really bursting. They burst right out of their covering. The old covering splits, and the worm crawls out in his new covering. That's called molting. He's bigger now, and stretches out to his full length, leaving his old covering behind. The larger worm at the bottom has shed his covering. The other one, a slowpoke, hasn't. In just a few weeks, the larger one has grown as big as your little finger. Those little holes are openings through which he breathes. And this is how he walks. When a silk farmer sees that his silkworms have eaten away most of the mulberry leaves, he brings them more. He pampers them like newborn babies. After eating steadily for 5 weeks in a row, the silkworms once again stop to rest. By now, they're as long as your middle finger. They've shed their covering 4 times, and they're getting ready for another change. They're full grown. They've stopped eating. They raise their heads and sway back and forth. When the silk farmer sees that, he rushes in with a rack of tiny cells and places the worms upon the rack. He knows they're ready to spin their cocoons. He wants those cocoons. They're made of silk. The farmer wants the worms to spin their cocoons inside the rack, and that's just what they'll do. Each worm now looks for a little room to his liking. Soon, each has moved into a separate room. The rack begins to look like an apartment house. Actually, the rack is like a tiny factory. Already, the silkworms have begun spinning threads of silk, which the worms are attaching to the ceilings and the walls. A sticky fluid comes out of an opening in the worm's upper lip. When that fluid hits the air, it hardens into a fine silk thread. First, the worm spins the outer covering of its cocoon. In the beginning, it looks like a spider's web. The worms need to be kept in a quiet place. Any loud noise disturbs them. They stop weaving if disturbed. Next, the silkworm doubles itself over like a pretzel and begins winding the long, continuous thread of silk around and around its body. Now you see the cocoons taking shape in cell after cell after cell. Some of the faster workers finish their cocoons early and prepare to go to sleep for 2 or 3 weeks, during which they'll change into adults. But the slowpokes are still weaving the insides of their cocoons. When the light is right, you can see them right through the cocoon. That's how fine their silk is. Left undisturbed, the silkworms will turn into tiny moths or pupas, as their mother did in the beginning, and bore their way out. To avoid that, silk farmers gently press the cocoons from the racks and prepare to unwind the silk threads from the rest of the cocoon. The cocoons, resembling eggs of a small bird, separate easily from the racks. They're gathered here in a mound. At this stage, the cocoons are soft, undamaged, and weigh very little. One fits comfortably in your hand, and you can easily unwind the individual threads with your fingers. But the thread is not woven immediately. Soaking them in warm water softens the gum that holds the thread together. While they're soaking, a worker takes the ends of threads on 4 or 5 cocoons and twists them together so she can put them into a guide like the eye of a needle. She needs several threads at a time because a single thread is too weak to wind and would break. Now the thread is wound around and around on a reel. Finally, the thread is woven into large rolls of silk, ready to be color dyed and sent to companies that make clothing of it. Things like fine shirts and blouses, men's ties,
ladies' scarves, and much more. Just think, it all began with a tiny insect that helps us all, the silkworm.
When you see an incense burner and hear that buzzing, you know there's an insect pest around, the mosquito. They seem not to like the smell of burning incense. The smoke interferes with their breathing. Down they fall. The mosquito breathes air. Cut off its supply of air, and the mosquito cannot survive. Many insects live on juices of plants. So does the male mosquito, and he's rarely seen. But the female is different. She's the one we hear buzzing at night. She lives on blood. She has antennae like long threads that seem to lead her to food. At the front of her head is a long tube, a beak strong enough to pierce an animal's skin or a person's and suck blood. As she drinks, her stomach changes color. Blood is thick, too thick to flow easily through the mosquito's slender beak. So she injects saliva into the blood to thin it. That's what makes you itch. Each kind of mosquito prefers a certain kind of food. Some prefer birds. They're attracted to chicken coops. Only the female mosquito drinks blood. Her beak is long and strong, just what she needs to pierce the skin and suck blood. The beak has 4 parts. One part is a channel through which the mosquito pours saliva into a wound to dilute blood. The male mosquito has no such beak. The parts he does have are small or even missing and too weak to pierce skin, so the male doesn't bite. Mosquitoes have 2 large green eyes made up of many smaller parts. They see in several directions at once. There's a claw at the end of each of the mosquito's 6 legs, claws they use to cling to smooth surfaces. They can easily hang upside down. Once her stomach is full, the female finds water that is very still, as in a pond or puddle. And on the surface of that still water, she lays her eggs. You'll notice she lays them between her back legs, end up, one against the other, and she lays them quickly. A few minutes and dozens of eggs later, she's finished. For days, the eggs drift in the water. Outwardly, nothing seems to be happening. But one day, the first baby mosquito breaks out of its egg. And here come her brothers and sisters. At this stage, they're called larvae, or wigglers. They appear large here, but they're actually so tiny they can barely be seen. Look closely, and you'll see they're clinging to the underside of the water's surface. Remember, they need air. They breathe through a little tube, which they push above water. From time to time, they dive to grab bits of food drifting by, but they can't stay down for long.
They shed their skin 4 times during this stage. The water is filled with empty, outgrown skins. How small these larvae are compared to an adult, but the babies grow quickly. In a day or two, they're much larger. They dive frequently now, looking for lots more food. And they find it, bits of waste and tiny living creatures floating in the water. Each one can stay underwater longer now, closing its air tube by means of small flaps. Still, the time comes when it needs another breath of air, so back to the surface it goes. The small flaps open, and once again, that air tube is thrust above water. Nothing like a breath of fresh air. After just a few days, each larva has shed its skin 3 times. The last time it sheds, the shape of the insect changes completely, and the larva becomes a pupa. There goes the old skin. In the pupa stage, the mosquito does not eat. It breathes through a pair of tubes at its front end and remains quiet while its body changes rapidly. If disturbed, it moves quickly by a sudden jerking motion. So fast do these creatures change, the pupa stage lasts only from 2 to 4 days. Then, the skin on its back slowly splits open, and out comes the adult mosquito. There are some 2,000 different kinds of mosquito known throughout the world. All develop at different rates. In cold climates, it takes months for a mosquito to develop into an adult from a newly laid egg. In warm climates, 2 weeks. The adult always comes out on a sunny day. It must dry itself before it can fly. There are the long legs of the adult, the antennae, the beak, and the wings. Resting on the surface of the water, she dries her wings in the sun. Trying her legs. She's never had legs before. Something new. She's resting now, but before long she'll spread her wings and take to the air, looking for dinner. Mosquitoes breed in trenches and ditches. Wherever water gathers, remains still and grows dirty. You'll find them in fields and tall grass, where they remain quiet during the day, but come out at night. You'll find them sucking juices from plants and from flowers. But you'll probably find them most often buzzing around near you and feeling their sting as the females drop in for dinner and bite. Such is the life of an insect that is both a pest and an enemy, the troublesome, buzzing mosquito.